Peace in Islam. Let's continue. We left off in the last video looking at some art. You can see the 6-pointed star of David, so you know the ritual is far and wide. You got the 5-pointed star with Spear, Venus, and Venus. Saint Maria, South America deity. Same deity. A depiction of Saint Maurice. So first holy black of the Christians. Even though his name is Saint Maurice, they still could call him the holy black. It is said that he was on a expedition with Lewis and Clark. Most likely been the head of the expedition, but they're gonna have him as a servant in the story. But yeah, he got the statue. So think about that. He is known as the first black Catholic in America, North America. Savage of the land of Natal, so-called savage. What we do see is he part of Red Cave Gang on you. And the land of Natal, Needle. Definitely sits in the far west Africa, on the tip. Known as the Orange Sailor. Some linguistics and scholars believe that's the definition or the meaning of the term Portugal. You see them get random the Bible. These represent the last few Moorish kingdoms that got swallowed up by Uncle Sam, bringing them trinkets. Showing them as a child mentality in the grand scheme of the world affairs at this time. We got the Mayan sister with the red and white. Another depiction of allegorical drawing of America. And again, across the entire Africa, from Peru to Australia, we see the kings getting carried in Atlantico fashion. We also see the umbrella that tradition. And those plates we saw in around the neck, we saw in another video that represent the ancient Canaanites. So we see them in the west with it. The Treaty of the Hostage Princess. The East Indies. India. But you see the red and green flag. It's like Morocco. And up there, East India Company. I saw this on the last video. The talisman of love, prosperity, transmutador, transformation, and so on. Find this in the West. It's old-time religion that predates all our religion of today. That's been spread around the world by the Carthaginians, Phoenicians, coming from the ancient empire of Egypt. We see one up behind him. Got one hand on this, but got one of those talismans in behind him. Let me see where they got the pitchfork from. Start at the end of the last video. Jacobus Elisa, Johannes Captain, African Moor. The original Black Elite. Story of a forgotten era. A whole lot of lost estates. And the reason why, because of this term right here. Simply because of this term. Lose your estate. Eventually, it might take a generation or two. We know that from the celebrities of our past. Celebrities from the 70s and 80s and 90s, half of them broke with no assets, passed down. And you've been in a different, uh, you've been in a different jurisdiction than this, and you've been had a different form of understanding of what assets are compared to what money is today. We look at money as a real thing when it's joint stock trust that we're trusting, but true wealth lies in assets. And on this land, gold and silver. And the further you go back, the more we knew this. Um, yeah, to be able to pass wealth down, you got a nationality, you need a nationality. Be able to pass wealth down, protect your wealth. And right now, people who got wealth, they create trust. In the United States, they create trust to attempt to protect their wealth. Some more pictures of South America. We count it as North America too. You can tell by architecture, right? Paramaribo. See how Rome called them bush blacks. Out of ignorance, because these people ain't even talk to them, so they wouldn't even know how to identify them. So they use terms like that, bush black. But for the Moors who actually go to the Reconstruction schools, the Jesuit schools, most of them come out into the world and brainwash most of the other Moors. Most of them eventually get caught up because of them. They're gonna grow up, they're gonna get to schools, they're gonna be the leading doctors and nurses, lawyers, teachers, and bring the Reconstruction history being taught to them, conversion into the Moors who won't be a part of Rome. Eventually, over time, as we see today, we pretty much are getting the teachings. That's what I mean when I say black Romans. They don't really know, but they're going to spread it as if it's truth. Some are saying got nothing to do with it. But we see in North America, most of us getting sent to the school, and it is Jesuit schools under another name, under public school, or under all the universities, even the black universities. Just the fact that they call it black university tell you that it's under Roman rule. Africa just like us with us in North America. We dress noble, but I dealing with these places parable for a reason. We will get at the end. We will get to their history and the beginnings. Most likely, what is this? This is the Africa that most of the North Americans who got that infinity with Africa. This the Africa they most likely came from, and vice versa. Like we saw in the last video, the closest travels is in the Americas alone, back and forth in one hemisphere, around and around. So common sense would say more of that been going on than any other travels off the Western Hemisphere. Now don't forget, the Western Hemisphere is counted as just America. Everything in the Western Hemisphere is America, and everything else in the world is in the eastern part of the hemisphere. So think of that. When they try to give you these generalized histories, try to make it as if your ancestors in the eastern hemisphere only had know about one half of the planet for countless centuries before they give you a date, 1445, where they can say that your ancestors first finally come over here. Well, not even the 1445, because they say they capture them and take them to Portugal, from Guinea to Portugal, in the 1405 event. Let's look at that. Calling yourself African American, African, Black, any one of those terms connect you to this history through the connection. Just like when we say we call ourselves Moors, so the history of Moors is our history. So as Blacks, the history of Blacks is your history. According to what you see out your own mouth, we call us if it's right or wrong. Because I don't see you as that. I see you as a Moor. It's a billion Moors in the Western Hemisphere. That's my claim, because that's how I see it. Can't go in my head and change how I see you. You can say I ain't wrong, regardless. Let's just start with the simple search. They usually have a date. And when you agree to this, you agreeing to the overseas empires from the Western European states. So they still playing you, saying that they got overseas empires over here, but you don't. See, they always give Brazil the most of the story, because that's that's what they gotta hide the most, based off the history we'll get to at the end. You can see why. Okay, 1526. So they gotta put you after 1492. You can't come here before them in their mind. That's how Rome think. So 1526. You ain't know about the western part of Earth. until 1526, according to this history, if you want to be under this history. If you don't, like me, all that's on this page is don't ain't talking about me, they talking about somebody who may look like me, but not me. Ain't got nothing to do with me. Now, if we cross-reference my history or what my history based off the hundreds of videos that you're getting right now, but this you might find similarities. That about it. But it's gonna definitely be told with our own mouth. I'm looking for a different event though. Before we go on, I want to find that event. I know they talk about it, 'cause they always talk about it. Just important too. Section using the Canary Island as a base. Portuguese traders. And you got wars between African tribes in Africa. But Portugal and Spain, just the same stories you're gonna get on this side. And and this time these Portugal and Spain, these been just Moors from Andalusia. Look at Paul Rodney on YouTube. We got a good bit of lectures and stuff. But you can tell he been trying to understand something ain't even right by his Roman education. He been an African American studies teacher, but he started to realize something ain't right with that education. And you already know the story after that. To get rid of his ass, he started to figure out the truth. He started to realize, hold up, Guyana. Something up with Guyana. I seem like we ain't coming from Africa and coming to Guyana. Seem like we anciently been our kingdom. Now we started to realize, and we have to end them. It's a world famous pen. Really much know what it's at compared to the true history. A lot of this could be North America. South America. These what we call, in the history book, you see them as the outcasts. The fifth and the outcasts are either enemy tribe, captured enemy tribe, you see, he's talking about the Treaty of Tordesillas. That New Guinea. That's Oregon there. And look, the Philippines. And China, Japan. The Malaccas. That's what Malaccas and Guinea. You see that on the other side of the world now. Papua New Guinea, the Malaccas, Philippines, and Asia. You already know. into. As you can see, they already had a beam on all this with the Treaty of Tordesillas. Jump right into America. So they're leaving out is the Moorish Empire. They got the Portuguese and the Spanish, but they have to get rid of the Moorish Empire because that's you. They can't have you as the African enslaved Africans and an empire. And then they would have to let you know that the Spanish and the Portuguese had outcasts too. The Christian outcasts. You see, Asiento. The Treaty of Alcocobas. See, 1672, 16 and 1700s is when the other side really get into a lot of play. Around the late 1600s, early 1700s. So before that, from the 14 and 1500s, those centuries, we were mostly dealing with America. We've been already dealing with Africa. Over here, Moors already been dealing with Africa since we got evidence through BC times. Okay, so we got 1600s. Mera. Maroons of Suriname. They call Maroons. 1811. Suriname. We're talking about labor forces, farmers, blacksmiths. A lot of these things were needed for the colonies, so they would get it one way or the other. We used to call them the quarry or the supply of the labor force. And they've been looking for the Dark Moors and the outcasts there to buy the outcasts from your kingdom. Your outcasts would have been basically what we call prisoners and exile, people who've been sentenced to exile and stuff like that. But even Spain learned the hard way first. They were the first one to learn not to sell your outcasts. And they extract all, they try to buy all the outcasts off the Cabo de Aguero Moorish factory, South America. They they realize because that's how you create a band of soldiers with the outcasts. You create all kinds of things with the outcasts that attack them. She learned that it's better to buy outcasts than your own settlers, especially her settlers, because she couldn't keep the colony steady with hers. I need you. Man, he got a servant. We see this in America on the inside of the pyramids too, where they holding a person by the hair like that. And that's a queen. That ritual. Got the lions on. Lion Tin. Yeah, you know who that is. They gotta go do some research on who they've been. All these statesmen, nobility. Negro expulsion from railway car in Philadelphia. Like how he dressed. Yeah, it's been a lot of elites, nobles. Just started to look into our Roman way, not our own way. And that's why it's Africa, in the Northwest, in the Southwest, and the people here, we show that. We women from Guadalupe. You had way more who be more to the land, who understand what they've done, who have their family records intact, than those that don't. And the further we go back, Madam Olive, Philae Day, the daughter of LLMM. A lot of old books from the 1500s and 1600s use that a lot. Instead of telling you what names is, they give you the initials. That's how you know it's somebody who got a hidden hand or got power from behind the scenes. Morio. país prohibie gritando de quiere. Translate that. The Cabaret of St. George, the Pont. Murat, Ethiopian chief. Small stone castles, Alcazars. You want to say Babylon right there? There's more from Andalusia. What we call Spain and Portugal today. Remember, Portugal and Spain had a lot of dealings with America and Africa in the very early times. Just know that they even call Andalusia the whole thing. They call Iberia and Rome Andalusia, France. They draw Indians and Andalusia at that time. You can tell with the parrot. And that's what they call Indian in their book. Because you know you're coming from that Rome point of view using that term. That's pretty much as a more from America. Don't let them fool you. More of Barbaria. Let's see what Barbaria, quote unquote, just means the land of Berber land, which is Castile way of saying the land of Moors. Mora, Ethiopia. Ethiopio. Okay, make that out. Egyptian. Grenada. CD Sufis, African Indian, mystic of the Gujarat. They call Africa and India on the other side worship too. And they call them CD. This side. Modern day. Look like Cambodia. Wars between Moors and Mongols. maestri. Another word, got the MR, like master, with more. Egyptum, Egyptians in Rome, Italy. You got that red, white, blue stripe. I know tons of this in Europe. For the whole museum with just this European art, Moorish, like this. Spinning shield for the algarve. The algarve is right here. One of the main ports in history, Lagos. To look into. See that intricate soak. This picture of King Fonzo first. King Indus, ruler of the North African kingdom of Aksum. Definitely Moorish architecture like we see in Portugal. No castles. It's in Brazil. It's a Brazil fair, quote unquote. I destroy a lot of these, but they keep record of it. Another fort in Brazil, the Rio Grande. The fort of the king, the Magi king. I already know the Magi king is the Moorish king. Are the three Magi's? Good job at drawing. Oh, yeah, Brazil. You see the 5-point star. The United States of Brazil, Estados Unidos do Brasil. So they show the Green Mountain. They put that in allegorical because this was Hannah the Navigator mentioned and Columbus mentioned. Okay. Relations with Allende, good or bad? Allende is. So you about to go and put the real story together real quick. Surrounding Columbus and the testimonies we get. See the real Duke right there too. Saint Amaro. Jenga. Yes. So require having ships. The coast of the Plaiseo goes down. Fishermen and merchants are forced to pass bars and go up rivers. The tonnage of the boats used by the navigators of Poniente, the west, oscillated between 30 and 45 tons. Suitable for sailing and rowing, they were preferred on deck. In the 13th century, so the 13th century, that's the 1200s. We find brigantines, galley boats, and whaling. In 1438, whales were Barbary entered the Felician ground with salted fish, cheeses, and 16 heads of Moor. The Muslims sailed in arrows, zabras, and tawny owls, these different ships. In 1340, the army of the Benin Marine, Alboacan, King of Fez, and Morocco had 80 sails. The Niles and the Caracas frequented the ports of Europe and the Mediterranean. Going to the outfalls, they sought us in search of fish, dry or in brine, which they exchanged for cloth, steel, and other products, scarce or of poor quality in Castile. And the Moors from Barbary flocked to the ports of an Algarve, we talked about that earlier, which started from Cabo de San Vicente, ending on the banks of the Guadalquivir. So she talking about us coming from over here, raiding Europe. This before Columbus, we raiding Europe. So you already know if we've been going up there, we've been going to Africa too, not easy travels. Paros was the Muslim Diabla from where Cordovan sailed in 1889 and 889. So we're going real far back. We're going back uh, yeah, bro. Look like somewhere in South America or Morocco, right? Crossing the sea to Ard Majula to return with the load of gold and expensive goods. conquered and negotiated the kingdom of Niebla. In 1257, Alfonso X compensated King Atmaureno for the loss, with the dominion of the Algarve and his gentlemen with inheritances in the Seville Aljarafe. According to temple custom, the lords of Palos, who seem to have replaced the masters, collected the church tithes, appointed the clergy without the intervention of the bishop, but not the civil justice. So what we're seeing is going from Andalusia into what we call Spain, going from Islam to Christian in Andalusia. By not the civil justice, elected by the common. With the village depopulated, Sancho IV granted the House of Palos with olive groves and orchards to his admiral P. Gomez Chirino. It was inherited by his daughter Berenguela Gomez, who obtained the privilege of Fernando IV to receive 20 toilets or settlers exempt from receiving, taking settlers from one part of Andalusia and bring them to other parts, most likely after they not run out the original inhabitants, exempt from breast and rights in perpetuity, except for the forever conversi. Married to Alfonso Caro de Rueda, she had a daughter, the wife of John Ruiz, son of Rui Fernández de Gibraleon, warden and tyrant of Niebla, who, taking advantage of the weakness of the Infante de Philip Alfonso the 11th tutor, built a fortress in Palos. And you know what? Why Granada been important? We got Mogor, Huelva, Umbria, Palos, Gibraleon, Macegon right there, Niebla. According to all indication, Columbus must have been presented to the kings at that time, most likely by Genoese, of those who moved at court, enjoying royal confidence, able to navigate without getting dizzy, a Bible technician as a print book merchant, a profession he practiced in Lisbon. According to Bernardes, knowledgeable in theoretical cosmography, easygoing, and right age to discover, quote unquote. Having passed the quarantine, his status as a foreigner and unknown favored him. So there are more people who know about this ancient trade between Europe and America, but wasn't one of the people who've been from here. There's been a lot of us from here who had know about it, because apparently we came from here and settled in Granada, Seville, Lisbon, Murcia, stuff like that. So Columbus he had the skills to do it, but he ain't been one of us at that point, even foreign, basically from Italy, Genoese. Even though some of us been over here too, getting over. So, visible top of the legal political pyramid, which would justify the rights of Castile to the Indies, called to be an advertising figure. See, he was an advertising figure. Not having friends or relatives reduce its danger, and the kings could take away the power they gave it, both in the economic as well as the political, when they wanted, without fear of an answer. Lacking a biography, it's even like an unknown, so they couldn't really contradict his so-called registrations. Um, like those who acquire notoriety in a mature age, the author's name more or less contradictory paths. The name Cologne is common since we find it in Italy, France, and the kingdoms of Spain. The mystery that surrounds the idol birthplace magnifies the myth, proving it by the rivers of useless ink that it has made run. Rodrigo Mendes Silva, a 17th century genealogist, makes him great great grandson of Ferrero Colombo, lord of the castle of Cucar. Let's check that out. Cucar. Probably I get a name change. Or without relating him to the corsair, whose counterpart, Micheloto, nephew of Columbus's wife, vassal and subject of the King of France, it is documented because he sank the ship of Pedro a day in 1487 in the spring of Duivel on the way to Honfleur. Others identified the discoverer with the captain of Louis the 11th, or they make him their son, regardless of the possible Jewish streak of Cristobal to which modern historiography refers. Most of them choose to bring him to the world in Savona in 1451 in a family of wool weavers with the shop of Genoa. So just like with the Vespucci guy, Vespucci may have been written differently in almost every author book biography about him. And Columbus the same, his story changed too much. Associating the commerce of the father by 1470, emancipated in 1476, they suppose that he sailed on behalf of Spinola and De Negro, Spain, and boy, who Pedro, homonym of humble caresser or owner, who in 1492 was leased with his boat. They say that traveling as a factor of both, the one that carried him was sunk by the French off Cape San Vicente. He saved himself by swimming to the coast, making a romantic entry into Portugal, which earned him the Lisbon factory. In 1477, he went to England in the service of the same employers. He went to Toulon with merchants from Bristol, bearing the coast of the fishermen off the coast of Bacalhau. We were talking about that earlier. And that's why he showed that basically he already been over here in this 1470s. But that's how different the understanding of the world in our minds been. People ain't really had maps like that Unless you could one of the top nobles. Well, he had a map, but he had nothing. A lot of people ain't had nothing. When he finally get one, that's when the 1492 travel started to come. He started getting understanding of the landscape. And he could contemplate frozen seas in good weather because the ice did not catch him. He is supposed to have visited Santo Domingo driven by the storm, helpless the island. He conceived the idea of conquering it. He exposed it to the King of England. So he already come from Santo Domingo, going back over and trying to get a sponsorship for war. Who did not attend to him, bringing the disappointment to the Azores, where he dreamed of a sunset, found what sailors were returning with a full bag, buyer of sugar and Madeira. He found them from the start, given the fly at the destination where he married in 1479 a Perostrello, sister of the governor of Porto Santo. In ships of the brother-in-law, he traveled to the Guinea mines, measuring the equinoctial to correct an error greater than 1 degree. In the Portuguese possession, Diego was born, the son that he took to Italy, where he returned, called by lawsuit. So Diego Colon, his son, born, and took him to Italy. As you can see, all over America, through the islands, to Brazil, and to Brazil, either Brazil or Veracruz, and then back to Andalusia. The delivery of Granada to the Catholics took place on January 2nd, 1492. It was the consequence of eternal struggles between the Moors and civilized agreements because of promise of respected mediated then talk about the Treaty of Granada toward the creed and customs of the neighbors. Called to the court Alfonso Fernandez de Lugo on February 19th. He was granted Donadio in Gran Canaria, which was a war, for the services and money rendered, especially for the conquest of Palma. On March 31st, including the crown of the Canary Islands at the top, the monarch decreed the expulsion of the Jews, forced to leave the kingdom before the end of July. The most Jews that are faced in Africa as a land of asylum, quote unquote, because we're talking about America. Regular communication with Lisbon from March. Juan II allowed them to reside 6 months in his kingdom, paying a crusader per head, waiting for transport to America. And that's a clue, the fact that Juan II allowed them to reside in Lisbon before they depart. It would have been unnecessary for them to do that, as they were going to Africa over here. Because Lisbon is a port that goes to America. Or you can say they've been going right here to right there, but they would add their own ships for that simple travel. We're going to phase, so it is assumed that they're talking about the phase right here, being that's how close that is. But why go to Lisbon away for departure? So that's clues that they were going to a different phase in a different Africa. Superimposed powers mix the followers of different religions. It is not easy to delimit the territory controlled by the Sharif. In other locations of Muslims, Jews, sun worshippers, animists, and Christians, more or less heterodox and original. Free the vassals of the Islamic monarch, so they were free. The most were free. That's why the treaty and peace of friendship written like that, because they free, but they still recognize the Sultan. And the King of Portugal to believe how they wanted in the Canary Islands and the Indies of Castile. And all that is America. When she said Canary Islands and Indies of Castile. Baptism was imposed by a black male. If it did not free the subject from the encomienda, I suppose y'all should know what that is. That's common American history. They teach us about this in schools. The labor system used in various former Spanish colonial territories. Encomienda system. Plantation, quote unquote, you could just call that the plantation system. So it did not free the subject from the encomienda and the half, it protected him from slavery. An easy convert, the animus, the Muslim should not have been so. If he did not have a large Islamic population, if it did not have a large Islamic population, talk about America, Charles V would have saved the certificate of 1540 prohibiting the captivity of the followers of Muhammad, who would have given vassalage to the Christian king. In the time of the emperor, this presence was omitted without falling into question the Antiquitera of 1493. The church supporting that the Quran had penetrated the great American island before the gospel, and thus will prove that the Treaty of Tordesillas proved that, because they're using the terms that Rome used for Moors, Saracen. Antiquitera. When you read the Antiquitera, they're talking about infidels, or whether they know it or not, they put into the law that Islam presence been in America before them. About one But once the force of propaganda was discovered in the course of the struggle against the different forms of Protestantism, both Protestantism, both the church and the crown head involved agreed to eradicate the past of the continent, thus evolving into the unfathomable nothing, the history that preceded the discovery. Once the samples of the autochthonous cultures were destroyed, as much as it was materially possible, the paradigm prevailed, passing unnoticed affinities of the archaic America with that of the Middle East. The archaeologists refraining from comparing the American with the statuettes of Mari or the Aegean. Of the conscious of the researchers did not detect the forms of a plump Buddha with oriental features and Olmec figures, or the attentive gravity of the scribe and Aztec head. It is because the subconscious has been informed that before 1492, the peoples of three continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia, connected by land, were unaware of the existence of the great American island. And I explained that at the beginning. And you believe in this 1492 hoax, you erase all the history that come before, subconsciously. The passage through the history of an authority, implaceable and censorship. That's what happens to history. Going through these so-called authorities, and that will get censorships come from. Was enough for the place names changed. The grandson forgot what his grandfather knew, and it was admitted that in America, as in the old world nations, and place names were superimposed on the same territory, long before the conquerors appeared. We know that the Fortunatas were not the Hesperides because Ulysses sailed for 30 days between the two archipelagos. So even ancient places get misplaced because of the hoax. Fortunatas. Look for Hesperides. See that? Fortuna. Costa Rica now, huh? Benghazi. Benghazi is Hesperides today. But it is difficult for us to admit that Carthage and Mauritania were born from the death of Tarsus, or accept that in the antipodes of Moluccas there was an Ethiopia, which was Guinea, called Tierra de Negros, land of blacks, because they were the natives, as on the other coast. So she's talking about this line. On both coasts. What are you looking for? Yeah. Americas. And Ethiopia been over here. As on other coasts. And Barbary, because Islam dominated, known by Asia and the Indian Islands. The regions were where the race prevailed of parrot or cocoa color. Parts or perhaps the whole, for some, or at some point were called the Canary Islands and Madeira, emerging later for reasons of geography, politics, and toponym, Cape Verde, the Green Cape, with its islands. Like all peoples, the Americans were subject to kings, leaders, and lords, native or foreign. Columbus practiced the rescue and imitation of those who passed through the Indies and Canary Islands, perceiving the kings of Castile and Portugal outcasts and fifths, such as the Sharif. Punta de Allende for the Portuguese were on the coast of the Maranon at 11 to 3 degrees south latitude, according to Guzman El Bueno's demand, according to the characteristics of the land. Since the tropics did not produce wheat, barley, or olive trees, the natives, who seemed accustomed to consuming them and to procure them, imported. The fondness manifested by the hero of Tarifa to get ports on the Algarve coast. So we've been going to the Algarve coast to get these ports because we wanted those products. From here to the Algarve coast, like we saw earlier, we wanted those products. The change of the lordship of Alcala de Sidonia to de Las Gazules for the land of bread and olive trees. You see, Los Gazules. Definitely look like Cuba or something. But now you know why we want that place. They grew bread and olive trees of Monte Agudo and the purchase of Alijar. So we had all those places. These what you call our overseas kingdoms. Can't let Isabel take even this from us. Where she get Granada, that's why she began these. And so you have most from Andalusia, they've been from all over the world in Andalusia. We're showing you some of the stuff that we had over there. So generous in cereals, from where he would have to obtain the 300 P's destined for the homeland, could indicate that he passed through Castile as an agent and supplier. So we had these agents and stuff going for us to get the products of the Kingdom of Morocco, explaining the presence of his firstborn together with Infante de Juan, who besieged Tarifa, supported by Abikov's troops. The custom of guaranteeing the fidelity of servants prominent in the foreigner, holding the most valued relative as a hostage. The grandson of this Guzman's was lord of a mysterious island of Ardeles. So we get into names that they ain't even used no more, but exist in records talking about America. Because his grandson, that's when he started to be called Canary Islands, and his great-great-grandson, the Cape of the Aguirre Islands, Cabo de Aguirre. Basically, this term Aguirre became Amazon. Of the son who inherited the founder of the house, We only know that he was born in Morocco and sued together with his covenant of Saint-Ponce against the Almoravids of Seville to be able to continue taking the oil from the harvest by sea. There's a map that's showing America. We got Tamaracque. We're going to see why that's important. You see all the words, Cas Amaraca, Amaraca. Santa Cruz de Cabo de Gui, written by an author in this book called Voyage of Brazil. You see down there, got Barbaria and Barbaria. The Wikipedia page, is from the Order of Malta. Let's check the Wikipedia page. And they don't even check their own work. They might change them now since I don't kiss them, but they can't get away from it. Cabo de Arguer, they put in Morocco today, of course. Let's look for Cabo de Gui. Santa Cruz just means Holy Cross. Go to the Portuguese Wikipedia. You see, in Morocco. And we just see, you see, it's a Arguer. Santa Cruz de Cabo de Gui, Voyage to Brazil. And this one say Morocco. And they used the picture from the Brazilian one. Visit of Cabo de Gui. They put that, even they put this on the page. And they put the one from overseas on the page, Agadir, which is another, what they don't know is Agadir is a term that means fort, so that means that's not the actual name. They try to take that as that's the name. You have an Agadir on both sides, because that just means fort. Port. Man, we are the first. We talk about that in another video. The Sequoia. So that would be our Guerre. So I don't know. They even know if they catch that. But they show you one written in the earlier times in Brazil. And these places of the where the Order of Malta got its jurisdictions. You want to look at that later, the different orders. So they're talking about in Agadir, overseas, and this word right here, Tamarat. This, on the outside would be Tamarakwe, like we showed you earlier on that map. And that's where the capital de Aguirre would be on that side. So got people like John Lopez de Sequeira. Even the captain of the fortune of the Santa Cruz, the capital degree in the 1500s. Ahmad I Tinker, leader of Dantinete. Just when you fall in the Santa Cruz Cavalry Degree history. If you already know it on the other side of the course, you can follow the history. In 1578, the Battle of Wadi al-Makazin. Everything terms like Mazagon and Amexin, all is the same type of term, just in different spelling. Oh yeah, I put that in there. It would be then when the division of the Americas into three colonies became fashionable, particularly significant in the headings of the royal cedulus. Juana, like the Philippines, was queen of the islands of the Canaria and de las Indias and Tierra Firme of the Ocean Sea. The first section includes the possessions of Fernand de Peraza, acquired under the lordship regime. They had meticulous doubles in gold and other coins of their own. So that these nobles from this side, Fernand de Peraza, who had possessions, and they put that under the crown. And they had their own gold too. People own purchase the shit on it. Tierra Firme was never controlled. The regime of voluntary vassals was maintained, and probably the outcasts. The occupation remained in settlement, a base for raids. Christians and Muslims sharing the dominion of a land whose inhabitants knew how to handle the Qur'an. In the rest of the Indies, the Colombian colonization of material occupation prevailed, preceded by dispossession and prolonged and instrumentalization of the native as a work tool. So we'll start right there. And on the next one we got tons of more of these to go through. Going through how the management, the setups, who involved, name dates, place names, this. Same things we've been doing. So peace to next time.